talk about travel essentials, usually we're talking about items that will help you be more organized or comfortable on your journeys. But there are also travel essentials that will save you money, keep you healthy, and generally prevent you from having a miserable vacation. Today, I'm sharing 15 travel essentials that have saved me, my family, and friends from disaster. Let's go. The first item up are air tags, and this is a very recent experience that we had, and I was so thankful to have the air tags in our luggage. On our flight to Africa, we got delayed in Atlanta because of a thunderstorm, and that caused us to almost miss our flight from Amsterdam down to Johannesburg, Africa. We made it on the plane. We did have to run through the Amsterdam airport. We barely made it onto the plane for our flight, but our bags did not. And because we were flying to Johannesburg, then getting up the next morning and flying again over to Zimbabwe, our bags did not show up for almost 3 days. So I was happy to have the air tags in the bags so that I knew where they were at all times. I mean, yes, it was not fun news to arrive in Johannesburg and not have our luggage arrive with us, but we were pretty certain that that was going to happen when we barely made our flight in Amsterdam anyway. So having those air tags in our luggage, and we could track exactly that we knew that our luggage was in Amsterdam, and then over the next few days, we could see when the luggage arrived in Johannesburg, and then we could see when the luggage actually finally arrived in Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, so that we actually were able to finally get our luggage for the rest of the trip. And that leads us to the second life-saving item that, again, was a lifesaver on this particular trip to Africa, and because of this situation where our luggage was delayed, and that is compression packing cubes. This trip, let's just say this trip started off with a few hiccups. Number one, and I hate to admit this because of being a travel motivator that I am, but you know, we all make mistakes at times, and some of those are pretty big mistakes. And this big mistake that I made was that I left my passport at home before our flight. The way that I have to travel is because I fly out of Raleigh. It's about 3 hours away from me, and my sister lives up in that area, so I usually go up a day or two ahead of time, stay at her house, and then drive over to the airport and fly out. And because my daughter was joining me on this trip, I had gone up 2 days before our flight to Africa for Alex to fly in from Portland. The next day, after I picked up Alex from the airport, the next day we were checking in for our flights for the Africa trip, and I realized that I had never packed my passport. I had never picked up my passport and put it in my bags to bring with me. So I made a 6-hour round trip drive from my sister's house back down to the beach to get my passport and back the afternoon before we flew to Africa, because yes, that does happen. So note to everybody out there, make sure, double check, triple check that you have your passport when you're going on a big trip, especially one like this. So for whatever reason, it just felt like this trip was kind of starting off on a little bit of a weird start. So I had the foresight, I just went with my gut feeling, and I packed an extra set of clothes and pajamas in my compression packing cube and put it in my personal item bag, because I was like, I don't know, I just feel like perhaps something might happen. And sure enough, it did. That thunderstorm really screwed everything up for us when it came to our bags. But having that compression packing cube filled with a whole other day and nighttime stuff to wear really made a huge difference when we didn't have our bags for another 2.5 days. It was very nice to have a clean set of clothes to put on the next day after traveling for 30 hours. And it was really nice to have a set of pajamas to be able to sleep in. So I absolutely will continue to pack that extra set of clothes. Usually I just throw in an extra shirt and a pair of underwear, but I was really glad to have been super thorough this time. And those packing cubes really compress everything down so much, so it does allow you to get that extra amount of clothing in there and for it to fit into your personal item bag. Those Compression packing cubes are so helpful in so many other ways, but being able to have that extra set of clothing, that can truly be a trip saver like it was for me on this trip. Now, moving on to something a little different. One way that I have saved a ton of money and I make sure that I have reliable communication during my travels is by using an Airalo eSIM. Airalo is the app that lets you download a digital eSIM straight to your phone. No physical SIM cards are needed, no waiting in lines at the airport. And during our Nordic trip last winter, we traveled to 3 different countries for almost a month. If I had used the international plan on my home cell phone provider, it would have cost me a fortune. Instead, I paid just $25 and I had plenty of data to navigate the cities, make sure we made it to our trains on time, and stayed in touch with family back home. It's super simple to use. You just download the free Airalo app today, use code GEN3 to purchase your eSIM in advance, and only activate it when your trip begins. I've done a whole video with step-by-step instructions on how to use an eSIM that I'll have linked below too. With over 200 countries, regions, and even global plans to choose from, Airalo not only saves me money, but gives me the confidence that I will have data for my maps, tickets, and communication when I need it most during my trips. A big thank you to Airalo, one of my absolute favorite apps that I use all the time, for sponsoring today's video. After you download the free Airalo app, make sure to use code GEN3 for $3 off your first eSIM for your next trip. Now, if you download that eSIM, you're probably going to be using your phone a lot more. And another item that saved me during our Nordic trip was my portable charger. When temperatures are super cold, the battery on your devices run down so much quicker than normal. And that was definitely the case when we were traveling through Sweden, Norway, and Finland, especially up in those areas where we were above the Arctic Circle. Our batteries ran down really quickly on our phones when we were out trying to film stuff during the ice, when we stayed at the ice hotel, also when we were out looking at the northern lights. You just want to make sure that you have a portable charger to keep your battery charged so that you don't miss some of those incredible filming opportunities, like when my daughter caught her fish when she was ice fishing, or when we saw the northern lights. I mean, both of those, it would have been very sad not to have had a battery on my phone in order to get those moments. A portable charger can save you in so many different ways, and it is so important for us to keep our phones charged and functional when we are wandering around in, unusual destinations or new cities. You absolutely want to be able to have that ability to communicate or look at a map and figure out where you need to go if you get a little lost. Another very important item to have to save your trip is an international adapter. You don't want to get somewhere and then not be able to charge any of your items when you get to your accommodations. Having an adapter that is functional for multiple different countries just is a great item to throw in your bag no matter where you are going. The Epica adapters, which I've talked about quite a bit, have been extremely helpful on many of my trips, no matter where I am going. From the Nordic countries to Africa to Portugal, like pretty much everywhere that I have traveled over the past couple of years, I have taken my adapter with me and used it. It's not just helpful in adapting between a US plug and an international plug, like an EU style plug. It's also functional when you have a US style plug. So when we were in Africa, a couple of the accommodations actually had US style plugs, but I used the adapter in order to use it as my charging block because it has multiple different charging, options. It has a couple of USB-C charging outlets. It has a couple of USB regular charging outlets, and it just allows you to be able to charge a lot more, especially when those outlets are kind of scattered around the room and they're not necessarily close by the bed. Maybe you have to use the desk area in order to charge it. But it was very useful for all of those trips for that, to be able to charge all of my camera equipment, my headphones, my computer, all from one charging block. So that one adapter works so well as a charging block, saving you from perhaps only being able to charge one thing at a time. This next item is a small but mighty little helpful saver, and it's these zipper pull locks. Last year on the Nordic trip, I decided to take a cute little backpack as my personal item bag with me. It's adorable. I love the print on it. It's by Aloha. They have some really cute prints. Unfortunately, anytime the backpack was completely filled up with items, the zippers would start to come apart and the whole back would open up. In fact, I was standing in the passport line in Amsterdam on our way back from the trip at the end of the trip, and I had that backpack packed full because we bought quite a few souvenirs there, and the zippers had started to come all the way across, and the person behind me was like, "Ma'am, you're about to lose all of your stuff out of your backpack." And I was like, oh God, I was so embarrassed. So the first thing I did when I got home was to add those zipper locks to that backpack. And I have also put them on a couple of my purses that I like to carry that don't have their own locking ability. They are just the perfect thing to add another layer of security to any item that zips that might not have its own way of locking. So these are, I wish that I had it on the Nordic trip. It would have saved me, you know, the lack of security that I had on that backpack. But I am definitely glad that I have had them since then, and I've put them, like I said, on a couple of my different purses and my other backpacks, and I have definitely added them to that Aloha backpack too. This next trip saving item comes to you via my travel advisor, Heather, and it is her dry bag. She brought the dry bag specifically to use when we did our Victoria Falls excursion, but she ended up using it for a lot of other things, and this is how it has saved her. So she used the dry bag to actually pack her liquids bag into when she packed originally for the trip, and that was just as an extra precaution in case any of the liquids, you know, came open during the flight. And none of them did, but it's just a nice secondary layer to have in case those liquids, you know, start to leak. The most important way that she used the dry bag is she took it on the excursion on Victoria Falls, and she used it for the areas that were a little more wet in order to keep her DSLR camera from getting wet. It wasn't as wet on Victoria Falls during the day that we went. It's actually low season. It's getting a little dry, so there's not as much mist coming up into the air. But there were a few spots along the way that you did get pretty damp and not quite soaking wet, but the camera definitely would have gotten wet if she had not been able to put it into the dry bag. And then the third way she ended up using the dry bag, which was an unexpected way on this trip, is that she used the dry bag to pack all of her dirty clothes in, and then used it as a second checked bag going back to the States so that she had room in her suitcase in order to pack all of the souvenirs that she had bought on the trip. So it was a nice, you know, I talk about packing that extra tote bag or duffel bag so that you have an additional, you know, you'll have that additional space for souvenirs, and that's exactly what she did with the dry bag. From now on, I didn't pack a dry bag for this trip, but I think that it'll be something that I will start including in my packing list too. Next up is this silk cashmere blend scarf that I got from Quince that I used as part of my travel day outfit flying from Atlanta to Africa, and boy was I really happy to have this scarf. First of all, I used it as a wrap on the plane on the way there. That, you know, I got a blanket, but it was kind of nice to have something that I could wrap around my shoulders when I was trying to sleep on that overnight flight. But it was also extremely helpful to have when our luggage didn't arrive and I didn't have my puffy jacket with me in those early mornings. So the mornings there are kind of chilly. Like you wake up and it's in the maybe mid to high 40s, maybe up to low 50 degrees, and it's chilly. And I did not, my puffy jacket was packed in my suitcase. So all I had with me for those first couple of days was my cashmere scarf and my kind of zip up hoodie jacket, which isn't super heavy. So having that scarf really kept me warm for those few days before I got the rest of my luggage and I actually had warmer stuff to wear. I really, really loved the weight of this scarf, especially for a travel day outfit. In fact, I'm probably going to get it in maybe another color or two. Moving away from the Africa trip for a bit, another item that has absolutely saved my butt when I've been traveling is my packable rain jacket. When I traveled to Japan and Korea a few years ago, it was typhoon season, and I didn't really think about that much when I was packing, but I had thrown in my packable rain jacket just in case, and boy, did we get some downpours. We were running from a specific typhoon in Japan for a couple of days, and then when we got to Korea, we just had downpours for the first 2 days that we were there as well. Having that packable rain jacket allowed me to get out and do things around Japan and Korea without worrying about constantly getting soaking wet and having to dry my clothes. And I have used this packable rain jacket on multiple trips since then, and it's come in handy. In fact, in Ireland, I didn't necessarily need it for the rain, but there was one day that we went out to the Aran Islands where it was really, really chilly and windy, and I had not packed a puffy jacket, so I was able to just wear the packable rain jacket over a heavier sweater, and that helped as a windbreaker and kept me warm during that day too. This next item is kind of a small item, but boy does it pack a big punch when it comes to saving your butt, and that is a bandana. The first time I traveled with a bandana was to Japan because it was recommended to bring one to use for drying your hands after you use the bathrooms there, and also in Korea I found there wasn't a lot of hand drying options in the bathrooms, so having that bandana that I carried around and had the ability to dry my hands off was really, really nice. It was also very helpful on the day that we hiked up to get udon noodles to have as something to help with the sweat. I wore it around my neck and then kind of used it to keep the sweat off of my face because it was extremely humid that day and very, very sweaty. Now, I did forget to bring one on the safaris. I meant to throw the bandana in, or at least a couple of buffs, because they had said that it gets really dusty on those game drives, and having something that you can kind of cover your face with would be very helpful. Alex did remember to bring her bandana, and she did use it to help with that dust. I would use my scarves that I had brought with me, but I don't think that they were as helpful as a bandana would have been, or even a buff would have been. But the bandana is definitely multifunctional in the ways that it can save your trip. Another small but mighty item that can save your butt are little blister pads. I carry blister pads with me everywhere I travel now. The lesson that I learned was the very first night that I arrived in Japan. We walked around Tokyo a ton, and I was wearing, a pair of shoes that I had not broken in or worn for a significant period of time on that very first night, and I got blisters everywhere. I didn't bring blister pads on that trip, but I had Band-Aids that I just put all over my feet, and I never wore those shoes again for the rest of the entire trip, and they were kind of heavy, so that was kind of a waste of having those shoes in my baggage. That taught me the lesson to bring blister pads wherever I go, and I have used them. I don't think that I needed them when I was in Ireland. In Portugal, I wore my Reef sneakers one day, and most of the time they were fine, but there was like one day that I was kind of getting a hot spot, and I just threw a blister pad on there and it was fine. My sister got blisters on a couple of places on her feet, and so she used the blister pads too. But I swear I will never ever travel anywhere without those blister pads, because boy, having blisters and hot spots on your feet when you are trying to enjoy where you are traveling and walking around and seeing all the sights, that's just really miserable. I think this next one is kind of an unexpected trip saver, and that is Aquaphor or possibly Vaseline. And this is something that I like to take with me as kind of a cold prevention to help with dryness, whether it's on your lips or your nose. It was definitely a trip saver when we were in the safari areas in Africa, because there's like no humidity. Like, I think the humidity level was at 40%. And I don't know that my body has ever been somewhere that dry before. Now, I had like a lot of dryness in my nose, and occasionally when I would blow my nose, there'd be a little bit of blood, but I did not have a problem with spontaneous nosebleeds, but there were a couple of ladies, including Alex, on the trip that were getting regular nosebleeds because it was so dry. And Alex would just put the Aquaphor up in her nose a little bit to help keep her nose more moist, because it'll hold in the moisture instead of letting the moisture come out, the moisture that whatever moisture is available for your nose, it will kind of keep it inside of your nose and keep your nose moist. For the cold prevention, it's just nice to put on the outside of your nose, and it'll help. The idea is, I mean, obviously this is just a theory and maybe a little bit, it is definitely not medical advice of any kind, but the idea is that the more moist that your nose is, the less likely that viruses will, be able to get up into your nose and embed themselves and make you sick. So having that Aquaphor along for both of those things is really, really helpful. The whole bloody nose thing was something that I was not anticipating. So if you are traveling somewhere that has low humidity, like a desert for some reason, or a safari area, maybe you're going to Oman or some of those exotic areas, I would consider taking some Aquaphor, definitely something to keep your nose moist, because bloody noses were unexpected. They were not on the bingo card, that's for sure. And while we're on the subject of kind of physical healthiness, this next item is something that absolutely saves probably almost all of my trips, and that is motion sickness bands. Ever since I went to Guatemala and I was on a shuttle from the airport to Antigua, and it was a curvy, dark, narrow road, and it took about an hour to drive from the airport to Antigua, I was not anticipating how motion sick I would get on that trip. And I almost immediately got sick, and I did not have any Dramamine with me. I had not even heard of the motion sickness bands at that time. I was miserable. So when I got home, I started doing some research, and I found these motion sickness bands, and these are like inexpensive little motion sickness bands. And honestly, if it's something that I know I'm probably going to get really, really motion sick on, I will take Dramamine. But for the most part, these motion sickness bands have really prevented me from getting sick on longer bus rides, on shuttle rides. I've even sometimes gone out on boats where I've only used the motion sickness bands and not taken Dramamine and been totally fine. I throw these in. I got a set of 6. I want to say they're only like $5. So I have at least 2 sets with me on every trip. That way I can share the love if someone else is motion sick. We had a situation on this trip where the shuttle that we got that was for a 3-hour drive ended up being pretty small, and the AC wasn't working on it. And that really was, we had a section that was about an hour-long section we had to drive that had a lot of continuous speed bumps. Like, every quarter mile there was a speed bump. And that was really pushing the limits on the motion sickness bands. But I stayed fine. Like, I did not get too terribly sick on that ride, and I was very thankful that I had the bands on. Otherwise, I think I would have been really nauseous by the time that we arrived at our destination. So motion sickness bands go with me everywhere. I also have that Dramamine goes with me everywhere too. On this next item, I might get a little TMI with you, and that is these laundry detergent sheets. Now, I've been taking these with me on every trip for quite a while, and I wouldn't necessarily say that they were trip savers up until recently. I had my gallbladder removed back in January, and on our trip to Portugal, my intestinal system is still kind of working out the kinks of not having a gallbladder. And unfortunately, on our first full day that we were in Portugal, and we were walking around, and eating things in Portugal, and, not having regular bathrooms, I had a little oopsie. So I needed to wash my underwear out that day. So having those detergent sheets to be able to really actually clean my underwear out was very, very helpful, especially since it was the very first day of the trip. And I didn't want to be packing dirty underwear to go with me on the rest of the tour that we were doing. So I was very happy to be able to clean them immediately. I know I could have used the shampoo that was provided by the accommodations that we were staying at, but sometimes a little nervous about whether or not I'm going to break out from the shampoos. I'm not as sensitive as Alex is, but I have had some sensitivities. And that leads me to how the laundry sheets were actually a trip saver for Alex on this Africa trip. We did have some laundry done about midway through the trip, and Alex had, you know, a lot of her underwear and tops and stuff laundered. Unfortunately, whatever detergent or dryer sheets or whatever they used when they were laundering our clothes, Alex was very allergic to. So she started breaking out after wearing some of those items. So we were able to rewash some of her clothes in the using the laundry detergent sheets because they are hypoallergenic. Rewash those clothes and hang them up to dry in the room. And so she was able to have more clothes to wear instead of being stuck wearing clothes that were washed in laundry detergent that was giving her basically a big rash all over her body. So bringing those hypoallergenic laundry sheets has definitely been more of a trip saver than I ever thought that they would be. And our last trip saving and definitely money saving item is a luggage scale. When we were coming back from the Nordic trip, we absolutely needed this luggage scale to be able to figure out what we were packing in our checked bags, what we needed to keep out and add to the 2 carry-on bags that we were taking with us. And it was a struggle. Alex had to unpack and repack her suitcase probably 5 times before she was able to get her checked bag to be under the 51 pounds that we needed in order for it to check it and not have to pay overage fees. And the same for our Africa trip. We had the luggage scale with us. We didn't buy as much heavy stuff on this Africa trip. Everything was a little bit lighter and our clothing was a little bit lighter. So we didn't have as much of an issue, but it is still nice to have that luggage scale and know what you are bringing to the airport before you get there and you're told that you have to unpack and find another place for 5 pounds that's in your checked luggage, or you end up paying $75 for that overage fee. The luggage scale is absolutely something that I always bring with me, even if I'm only packing carry-on, because you never know what you might end up buying when you're traveling. I mean, I could have brought back like 3 bottles of wine from South Africa, and that would have really made my suitcase pretty heavy. So that luggage scale goes with me everywhere and has definitely saved us some money. Now, I do want to talk about a bonus item that is not a physical or material item that you bring with you on your trips that will save pretty much any trip from a disaster, and that is your flexible, positive attitude. Having a flexible attitude when you are traveling is probably the most important thing to have in order to keep any trip from becoming an ultimate disaster, or at least turning any disastrous trips into very good, humorous stories. Now, I could have been pouty and depressed and, cranky about not having my luggage, but at that point, do I want to have a bad attitude and ruin my trip and maybe the trip for the people that are around me? Or do I want to just be like, oh, well, stuff happens and just go along with the flow. And that's what I chose to do, because what are you going to do? I mean, if you don't have your luggage, you don't have your luggage, and you just got to figure out a workaround. That is having that flexible attitude that you need to have when you are traveling. And it doesn't matter what the trip is. You would be going to an all-inclusive, resort for a vacation, and, stuff is going to happen. And you just got to be what a friend calls duck feathers. You just got to let the water roll off your back, have duck feathers, and be okay with what's happening. Obviously, you don't want people to take advantage of you, but when things are happening that nobody around you has control over, you don't have control over, the best way to deal with it is to have a flexible, positive attitude. So make sure that you pack that with you on your next trip. Now, these are all great travel essentials that have saved many of my trips from becoming disasters. But if you're curious about travel essentials that I would not buy again, this is a great video to watch next. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have safe and wonderful travels.